Welcome to the SemiAmericans podcast, season 3. I'm your co-host Daniel Yu, joined by my co-host Emmanuel B. We have a special guest joining us today, an episode in the making over the past few seasons, and we are really excited that we were finally able to bring it together. Please allow us to welcome Dr. JP Mikhaiel. JP went to Georgetown Med School with Emmanuel and is currently a neurology resident at Yale in New Haven, Connecticut.
Welcome. I mean, come on, warm welcome out here.
Thank you guys. Happy to be here.
How you doing, man? I know I saw you a couple months ago, I think it was, last time that we hung out, but how are you doing? How you feeling? Made the long trip down from New Haven, Connecticut to the super secret location, to the studio. How you feeling?
I feel good. I got booked on the Acela business class. It's real luxury ride down here, so I'm happy to be here, ready to go.
Yeah, we try to take care of our guests over here on the SemiAmericans podcast.
I recommend for all future guests going out.
There we go. See, this is the kind of promo we need.
10 out of 10, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How's everything going though?
It's good.
Anything new? No, pretty much residency.
Yeah, residency.
Yeah. Daniel, you wanna take us away? I know we have a lot to get into.
Sure.
I want to make sure that we dedicate as much time as possible.
Definitely.
JP is one of the smartest, if not the smartest friend that I have, and I have a lot of them. But he's somebody that I look up to. He's somebody that I admire. He's like a moral compass to me. So this friendship is one that's deep and something that I really appreciate. So I hope all our guests get to experience the same things that I get to experience as far as his insight, and it'll be a fun episode, man.
Perfect. Yeah, so I mean, I got a little teaser into your background and kind of, what makes you, right? But obviously, a lot of our, actually all of our listeners don't really know who you are. So in brand with the SemiAmericans podcast, do you mind sharing a little bit about your cultural heritage and your background with us?
Yeah. So I grew up in northern Jersey, Bergen County, which is right outside New York City. Mm-hmm. It's a very diverse area, multicultural, multi-ethnic. Mm-hmm. So my in terms of my parents, so my mom is from Syria and my dad is from Iraq. Mm-hmm. So a Middle Eastern background. She grew up in Damascus, which is the more Christian part of Syria.
One of the oldest cities, right?
Yeah.
And like the world's history.
Yeah, one of the oldest cities. There's a lot of history there. Mm-hmm. That's how I grew up. We grew up going to the Syrian Orthodox Church, which was right in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And then, I just went to all the public schools in northern Jersey, which is a good school system and also very diverse.
And your father is from Iraq originally, mm-hmm. right? Is my understanding?
Yeah, so my dad's from Baghdad in Iraq, and so I grew up with as a first gen, mm-hmm. and with that background. Mm-hmm. But yeah. I
mean, I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stories, a lot of different experiences you can share with us. But of course, with you being on the SemiAmericans podcast, got a little promo here. We're not. Got to promote ourselves, okay? This is how we keep the lights on. But yeah, being on the SemiAmericans podcast, I think it would only be right if I ask you, do you feel like a Semi-American? Or is there another label that you identify with, or even no label at all?
Yeah, I do feel like a Semi-American. I think in some ways I have a very typical first-generation American experience. In school, you're just a regular American kid. I was listening to rap music. Mm-hmm. I grew up listening to 50 Cent, Eminem. Yep. And then in terms of style of clothes, I wore what everyone else wore. I mean, in my part of Jersey, we used to wear Echo and South Pole.
Shout out to
Echo and South Pole.
JCPenney.
JCPenney,
hey, JCPenney used to have all them sales. Yeah, no, I know all about that.
I kind of fitting in school. That's how it was. But when I go home, it's always something different. I think, mm-hmm. We ate Middle Eastern food. My parents speak Arabic, mm-hmm. And it was one of those things where they speak Arabic to me, and I always answered in English, but they let it slip. Mm-hmm. But I would say I am, semi-American in that way. I think maybe, I'm curious to hear your guys' experience, but different from you guys, I could pass mm-hmm. as a white person. And so mm-hmm. I felt like I was mostly American. I never really had a hard time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it was something different when I went home versus, kids who had many generations American went home. I think my house environment was probably different from just being, many generations American.
Right. Yeah. No, that's that's a really, it's interesting because you're, I think, the second guest that we've had from a Middle Eastern background.
Yeah.
In the prior season, we had a guest from Lebanon, Khaled. If that episode is up, if you guys want to check that out. And now with you having a different religious background, so there's a lot more nuance to. Sure, you might be from the same region or from the same area of the world, but that doesn't mean that every experience, that somebody from the Middle East has is going to be similar or the same. So that's really funny that you brought up all the different stylistic choices you have and everything. Which, by the way, JP is like he's very good when it comes to fashion and stuff, man. I run some things by him sometimes. I'm like, hey man, is this cool to wear right now? And he was like, no, that's not in season, man. You got to switch it up. So
back in the day.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the most unique events that I've ever been a part of was JP's wedding over the summer. And I was privileged enough to be one of his groomsmen too, against all odds.
What do you mean against all odds? You gotta expand on that.
No, I'm just playing. No, I actually didn't expect it because JP's and I's friendship, as far as like length of time, I met him in medical school, so we hadn't been friends for a long time. But I think it speaks to how close we had gotten over a short period of time and how much respect we have for each other. Yeah. But his wedding was one of the most unique events that I've ever experienced, been a part of. And I think JP is maybe the only friend I have that's in an interfaith marriage. Wow. Where the couple, both of them are from different religious backgrounds. So I'm sure JP can speak to, if he feels comfortable enough, of course, speak to us and the audience about what that journey was like. That coming together of two different religions, because the first part of your wedding was in a Catholic church, like in the morning, and then in the afternoon you had the wedding in a mandap, which is a sacred Hindu structure. So that was the afternoon. So you got to see
it was a multi-setting.
Yeah,
interesting.
Exactly. So
That's
you got
awesome.
to see two different worlds kind of come together. So mind telling us whatever about that.
Yeah, I think first we were really happy with how it all turned out. It was definitely a super long day for everybody. Glad all the groomsmen were there and friends and family stuck with us for 14 hours probably. But I think we were definitely very intentional about a lot of the decisions we made for the wedding. We wanted both of our cultures and both of our religions to be represented. And so it was important to us to have both ceremonies, and we also wanted to be very intentional with our selection of everything. And so, having gone to Georgetown for undergrad and med school, I thought it was really special to get married in the church over there. And Keita had come with me to the church previously, when I was in med school. And so it felt like a very special place to do it. The priest we had was actually a priest I met at Yale. Shout out Father Ryan.
Oh, okay.
And so, we were able to get him to come down on the train and he officiated the wedding, which was very special for both of us. She had met him too. We had pre-Cana classes with him. So
what kind of classes?
It was essentially
marriage counseling.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, premarital counseling.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we did a few sessions with him. So we both got to know him very well. And so it was really special to have him there. And then, for the Hindu ceremony, we had Achala. She's a Hindu priest. And so she had actually done Keita's brother's wedding. And so, again, that was very intentional. She's from Houston. So we kind of had this, flying people from all around the country to come to D.C. But
wow. Production.
It was a production. But I think that made it very special, and then even with the food selection, we had different dishes. Some had more Middle Eastern style. Some had more Indian cuisine. And then even the music, I think we tried to do some like Arab bangers, some like
I was
Indian
literally
bangers,
gonna say, you mix it up.
Yeah, we tried to mix it up. None of them hit, so we ended up the American music is all we play. We ended up cutting that.
It's like half the crowd knows it, the other half doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So, it seems like your wedding was very SemiAmerican-esque, right? In terms of how we try to brand it, right? Before the wedding, did you feel any pressure from your parents or community around you to marry within your culture or religion?
Yeah. I think so. Both our parents were a bit hesitant at first when we met. And, we both have very loving sets of parents. And I'm very close to her parents and she's very close to my parents. I think there was some hesitancy about, us making our lives more difficult. And so I think they were looking out for us, but, I think there was some concern of marrying someone from a different faith is going to be much more difficult in some ways, I think, for your relationship, and then also, having a family, God willing. And so they definitely had concerns initially. I applaud them both. I think they were very open and with a lot of communication. Eventually, I mean, we had their blessing. It was very intentional, and I think I give Keats a lot of credit for it. She was very good about introducing me to her parents, and then continuing to talk to them, and then same, she would keep talking to my parents, and I think with that sustained relationship, repeated interactions, they saw what a great girl she was, and I grew very close to her parents as well, and so I think that and loving each other's parents as people really helped to break down some of those barriers.
So that was the foundation. It sounds like that you established those relationships with each other's parents, had that connection, and then off of that you're able to build. Into, right? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, we've been together for so long before we got married, so we were dating.
Yeah, give us some context. What's the timeline?
You met up here before you went to med school.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So we met in 2014. We were both at the National Institutes of Health. And so, we both had that background. We had that science background. I'm doing neurology now, and she finished her neuroscience PhD. And so I think we had some shared interest there. I still remember going to DC spots early on. We used to love a lot of the coffee shops here at Tris, Northside Social, and we just have a lot of conversations. A lot of them about religion and our different cultures. I think there was similarity between both being first gen.
What was one of the biggest hurdles or boundaries that you, or the largest one that you guys might have talked about?
Yeah, I think so. And that was in 2014. In 2016. We both went on to grad school. So I went to med school and she went to graduate school in New Haven. And so, obviously, so now you have two people that are both from different religions and cultures and also now doing long distance. And so...
And her background is...
Yeah, she's Indian and she's Hindu. And so, you have all these different tensions. And so my first year of medical school, I remember it was around Christmas time and... we were talking on the phone and I was just kind of like, what are we doing? Are we really serious here? Are we going to get married? Because if we're not, we're both young, we're both in different school programs, we don't want to waste each other's time.
Yeah. This was about what, 5-6 years into the relationship?
This was 2 years into the
relationship. 2 years,
yeah,
okay.
So we met in 2014, so it would have been 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I think that was a very tough point. And I remember being in my Honda Accord back in the day. I remember sitting in the car and having that conversation with her and I felt like at that time I couldn't give up the relationship, and I my hesitations obviously were about religion, but I felt like I couldn't give up the relationship, and I felt that it was just meant to be. What's
interesting? We had that conversation after you had it.
Yeah, in the library.
It was after winter break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in the library, and so I think at that point we were like, okay, we're gonna do it. Both our feet are in. We're gonna do this. We're gonna make this work. No matter what it takes, but. It's easy to talk about now. That was almost 7 years ago now, but it was really difficult at the time. And I remember, feeling a lot of pressure about that decision. Yeah.
So it seems like religion was the most difficult challenge that you needed to solve, or at least try to work out, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
But while you guys were talking about that particular subject, was there one thing that maybe stood out? For example, if you guys did choose to have children in the future, right? How would that work out?
Yeah. So we talked about a lot of these issues. I think even getting to the wedding itself. So, how were we going to do 2 different ceremonies was a big issue even before it happened. Right. And so, we felt I had been going to Georgetown's Catholic Church for, almost 8 years at that point. And so I started to feel very close with the Catholic Church. In some ways, they spoke English, whereas in the Syrian Orthodox Church, it's not predominantly in English.
Okay.
And there's a very strong intellectual tradition that, I think I got from Georgetown, philosophical and theological tradition within the Catholic Church. And so I came into communion with the Catholic Church actually in 2021. And then, that's when we decided to do our marriage in a Catholic church and also a Hindu ceremony. So that in and of itself, was somewhat of a tension because, Syrian Orthodox would be the church I would do it at in New Jersey otherwise. And so I think that was one area, you know, and so that was a big hurdle already because
that wouldn't have been a possibility in a Syrian Orthodox church for you to marry someone of a different religion.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess outside of Christianity.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you know, I think that was one part of it, and then, you know, we've talked about children, and I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation.
Okay.
But we would never want to limit our children's ability to practice either religion, and so, you know, we've talked about baptism for our kids. You know, as a first step, but we would want to introduce our kids to both religions and
just expose them to both, and then kind of see how it plays out, right?
Yeah.
So, question for you there, right? Because this is a situation that a lot of people, especially like first gen, would find themselves in. Would it be more up to the child at that point, as far as what religion they identify with most, or they feel comfortable with, and choose that path, or?
I mean, to some extent, yes. And I think I thought about this a lot, you know. And I'm curious. I actually want you both to talk a little bit about your faith, because I think, you know, people come to faith in such a different way, and I think, you know, you have a religion as a kid, and then just from what I've noticed, a lot of people, it's almost like the prodigal son in the Bible, right? Like, people go away from religion at some point, usually when they're in like high school, college, maybe even a little beyond,
when they have the ability to make their own choices, right?
Yeah. And then sometimes come back to it, you know, and I think they come back to it in an adult, mature way, you know, whereas maybe they're relating to the faith was more childish as a kid. You know, these are stories that I'm told, and this is what's true, and everything outside of it is not. And so with that, you know, I think that's not to say that I would love to give my kids the gift of religion. But I think a part of it is, you know, you instill these values in your kid, you know, you teach them the tenets of the religion, and at some point they have to make it their own, you know, if they're going to seriously practice it. And so, you know, I think that's what I would hope for my kids. You know, that
kind of like providing them with all the tools and saying, okay, this is how I have presented the religion to you.
Exactly.
And is this the path that makes sense to you?
Yeah. Okay. And this is a gift I'm giving you, you know, but I can't just give it to you. You need to take it and make it your own. And so I think that's a part of it, you know, and how people come into themselves, I think, through adolescence. I mean, I'm curious on what is your guys' experience with religion, or how has your relationship been?
It's actually like pretty similar to exactly how you described it, where, you know, I was born into like a Christian Presbyterian based like religion, right? Basically, my parents were dragging me to church every single Sunday. It didn't matter if I was sick, like I was going to church, right? No matter what. Yeah. And then like, I guess once I had the freedom to like make my own choices in like college and whatnot, like I kind of like stopped going to like the actual like establishment of church, right? But it's not like I ever stopped believing in God or like my particular faith, right? But the actual act of going to church, and then like now these days I kind of do reflect more on like where my faith is, and like maybe how I can actually show that or project it. Right. So I am doing a lot of self-reflection within the past like year. So I don't know. This is actually getting me thinking too. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. What would you say?
I mean, we're similar in the sense that we grew up in an Orthodox household, right? And me being Ethiopian Orthodox, and so much of it is traditional, right? And we've spoken about this at length as well, where within the history of Ethiopia, the religion itself isn't, it's more than just a religion. It's woven into the fabric of Ethiopian history. So the culture is intertwined with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which is what the majority of the people practice as well. So for me, not being able to grow up there, I definitely missed out on aspects of the church. Obviously, you're not gonna, if you don't have the chance to grow up within the church, going there every Sunday, practicing in every fast and everything, there's something that's definitely lost there. And then our situation, of course, you have to take into account we are refugees, so it's not always ideal situations we find ourselves in. So we had to rely a lot on prayer and you know, your faith in pretty much in what's passed down from your parents, right? Now in my current tense, I do a lot of my own like reading, right? I try to practice with my reading of Amharic is pretty bad, but I'm trying to work on it, right? And when I read the Bible, for example, I'll read both the English translation, or I may listen to the Amharic audio, but read the English translation, right? So I have a bit of an understanding of what's going on and getting used to some of those like biblical terms, words, and whatnot, and lessons. As far as marriage is concerned, I think initially, especially for first generation immigrants, there's always a part of you that now you're getting exposed to different aspects of people's background and whether that's religion, culture, whatever the case is. But you either tend to hold on to those traditions that you grew up in, or it ends up being I feel comfortable enough, or I haven't held on. I didn't grow up in that culture that I'm okay with creating a whole new side of things for myself. And I don't know how that will work, to be honest with you. It's something that I've thought about. I think it would be difficult for me to be, not difficult, like I know I would want to be with somebody that's at least Christian. And then, like you mentioned, when God willing you get to the point of having kids, how would that work?
Yeah.
Raising kids in a household where there's two different religions can be difficult, and some people feel comfortable with that. I know you're one of the most, like I said, you're one of the smartest people that I know. You've thought this through and through, and you've done the same with your wife, and as long as you have an understanding and you come together, I think that's probably the biggest part, right? Where no one's pulling any surprises on the other person. This is what we've established. This is how we're going to go with it. We're on the same page.
Yeah.
So I think a term that you said earlier, conversation, and then a term that you just said, understanding many, is key, because through that you can actually build a relationship and come to terms with where you guys want to take your marriage / like mutual faiths, right? One way of thinking about it is, do you feel like you are making a compromise?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. You said something there at the end, though. You said mutual faith, which is interesting to say. I mean, I think that's the goal, at least, is to have it be a mutual thing. We're in it together. We're not doing our own separate faith traditions, but in a lot of ways, I'm introducing her to Christianity and why it's so important to me, and she's introducing me to Hinduism and the culture and why it's so important to her. And I think through that, and this may be idealistic, I think you enliven your own faith in a lot of ways. I mean, I think it's very easy to settle down with someone who's the exact same faith as you, exact same culture, and I think that definitely is easy in some ways and maybe more compatible. But then you also don't have to get into the hard questions. You don't have to get into like details on the faith, and you kind of just both could fall into the trap of assuming certain things and assuming that there's this base ground. Whereas I think this does encourage in some ways more conversation, and it's like, I need to talk about my faith. She needs to talk about hers. And I think that helps them grow in some ways. I will say, I think, God created all of us, and I think we both believe that. And so, we're all coming from the same God. And so, maybe God kind of expresses himself through different ways and different means.
Because it is, I mean, when you bring that up, it's a lot of it is regional too, right? Because it's like, if you're not exposed to your wife, obviously being following Hindu religion, she most likely would not have been exposed to that if she didn't have parents from India, right? So a lot of it is regional. Same way that Christianity is prevalent in some parts of the world more than it is in others. So there's definitely a historical / regional aspect to it that I think we need to take into account. That's true.
Yeah, and I think another thing is it's not easy to make sense of it all and of religion. I think there's an element, at least in Christianity, that's definitely a mystery, and we're supposed to embrace that mystery. I think if you're looking at orders of knowledge, there's philosophy and there's theology and there's faith, and there has to be some component taken on faith that can't be rationally understood. And I think that being said, I think God did bring us together. I think there's a reason that we fell in love, and I think there may be some part of the plan that we can't see. I think as humans, we want to put everything into like human-sized boxes, and so you want to put God into this. There's a tendency to want to put God into this human box, and God believes these people do this. Mm-hmm. But I think there's an element of mystery to it. I think there's something bigger, that connects us all as humans, and I think we both believe that. And it does take a certain level of openness that, is probably not traditional.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it's just a little bit of more legwork, right?
Yeah.
For you, but for you, it's worth it, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like for you, that's what makes the marriage stronger.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, like we talk about the wedding now, it's over, but I think beforehand it was very stressful. And even, before we decided to get married, I think it was very stressful on how are we going to make this work and are we doing the right thing?
Mm-hmm. So another question that we had, have you had any clashes on either one of your religions or values?
I think the big one was the wedding.
Was the wedding?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's, we did it in a Catholic church ultimately. And it wasn't a Syrian Orthodox church. And so I think that was, one area where it took some discernment to figure out the best way to do it. But I do think ultimately it was very special for us. And that's because, like I said, I had been going to that church for many years at Georgetown. That's a big one. And then I think clashes, we have clashes as like a married couple.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's not like religion based
and they're
or
not all
anything.
about religion.
Yeah.
But, I will say that I think being married has a way of humbling you and I think sanctifying you in some ways from maybe a religious perspective.
Sanctifying you.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So I will say, there is nothing like being married to someone to really see, all the skeletons you have in your closet and all the things that you fight about. I've learned so much about how I'm wrong in so many ways, right? Like I can get angry, I can get defensive. Sometimes I'm just kind of stuck in my own, selfish world. And I never realized I could be like that until, I was in a long-term relationship. With your friends, it's usually, you're fun, you're chatting. But I think, marriage has a way of kind of shining this flashlight on the skeleton.
Bringing like the best and the worst. Yeah. And it's like an ego check, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so, and from a Christian perspective, I think that brings you closer to God. I think I need to see all the ways that I sin. I need to see all the ways I become angry and defensive. I think those are really important things.
Man, you're making me want to go to church on Sunday. Jeez.
I told you, man. He has his stuff together, man.
Yeah.
No.
No, he does.
I don't know. Do you guys relate to that being in relationships or having been in relationships?
I definitely relate to what you're saying in terms of like seeing like the skeletons in your closet, right? And kind of learning that a lot of time my arguments personally about are like kind of like are more so about like ego, right? And it's like maybe like I think I'm right, or my significant other might think she's right, and it's like whoever may choose to hold on to their opinions longer, right? Without maybe saying I'm sorry or whatever. But yeah, that's something that I've realized.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of, when you mentioned that, let me ask y'all a question. Is there any room for pride and love? Because you just mentioned the whole
yeah, for sure.
If you really want to make it work, is there any room at all for pride and love?
Ultimately, I think no.
Okay. And a romantic love. We're talking about.
Yeah. No, ultimately, I don't think so. But like obviously, that's hard, right? And that's something that you can't just get rid of out of the blue, right? And it's something that you're continuously working on, similar to like, for example, your faith, right? Yeah. You're continuously working on that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think there is. And I think something, and this is more of a recent thing for me, something I'm starting to realize is that, I'm not going to get rid of all my flaws, and it's not possible. And, I think that's kind of the role of grace at least in Christianity again. I can't, I think I have a very strong ethos, and maybe it's an American thing of, I'm self-reliant. I will get over this by myself. I have sin. I am angry. Like I can just do, more meditation, more gratitude journaling, whatever it is. And I can overcome this, but I can't, and I won't, I think humanity is, from the Garden of Eden fallen in some ways, and we all carry that. And
It's like an innate thing.
yeah, I think so. And it's okay, that is why, God gives you grace, and we can't do it on our own. At least that's what I've come to believe. And so I think with that, I say these things, and I'm not good at this, but I'm trying to be a little bit better about, I'm not going to fix this by myself, and I need grace from God. And yeah.
So by the grace of God, we've been able to have JP here on this podcast with us for season 3. As we're about to wrap up, did you have any additional questions for him?
Yeah, I think my question to JP would be, with everything that he shared with us, all the insightful, incredibly insightful things that he shared with us. My question to you would be: do you feel like you're most at peace in your religious journey? And obviously, that's something that's for most, that's a never-ending journey.
Yeah.
But where do you feel like you are at your current state?
Yeah, I don't think I'm most at peace. I think I'm still on that journey. It's going to be. I painted everything in a very positive light, and I think things have been good. But I think it's a constant conversation. As we have a family, God willing, it's always going to be a conversation. Always going to be going back to the drawing board and talking to each other in terms of difficult decisions that we'll need to make. And I think in terms of my relationship with God, I think I have a lot of work to do still. I think I'm still just learning. And it's something where I feel like that may be, a process for life. But I'm working on it, and I think I have a ways to go. But I'm curious to hear how you both feel. Where do you feel along that religious journey?
I think peace-wise, I'm at peace. I think recognizing where you are in your journey. There's still a ton that I have to learn. Reading the Bible is not a simple task. Yeah. There are a lot of interpretations, a lot of meanings that you can take with the things that you read, of course. And obviously you have to set aside this dedicated time in order to get to that level. But that's something that I strive to do. So much more, I think, is also in your actions. What good does it do if you're able to sit there and read the Bible, but your actions don't reflect the values that are present within it, and the values that are instilled through your faith tradition. So actions is another big piece of that. Being humble, having purpose in your action, being pure in your intentions, all of that, I think, plays into where you are in your journey. Yeah. Where do you stand with that, Daniel?
I think I'm going to go off of what the last piece that you just said in terms of having purpose in your journey, because that is another portion of religion that I've been thinking about, is trying to find the purpose in my life. And it's why was I put on this earth, right? And because I was raised in a Christian background, I think religion does have a basis on the purpose portion of it. I don't have an answer yet, but I think through learning more about my faith and myself and my walk with God, that's something that I will hopefully get to and be more resolute about in the future. So that's something I'm working on.
So a fair bit of self-motivation, right? In terms of achieving that, or at least being in the middle of that journey, is you being motivated in order to get there.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's necessary, and something that I need to, I guess, invest some more time in, right? For sure.
Yeah, and I think conversations like these, with other people trying to figure it out, is definitely, steps on that journey. I think for me, talking to people about these issues has always been incredibly illuminating and helping me kind of see myself,
It's definitely helping me reflect on myself by having this space and having this discussion, for sure.
Yeah. I think we're mirrors for each other in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Thank you, JP, for making the time, for coming on to the SemiAmericans podcast. Fun fact, JP was actually the one that presented a gift to the podcast and had this custom made. If y'all can see it, it's a really cool light up glass show, I guess, it says SemiAmericans on air. So thank you for that. Thank you for making the time to come join us. As always, we really appreciate your insight. We love you. And we look forward to having you on in the future as well, hopefully as we continue to have more episodes.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me on. Every person I tell about this has great things to say about it. I think a lot of people love the concept and really resonate with it. I think you guys are doing, amazing things and really bringing awareness to a lot of issues that people feel in their hearts, but maybe don't talk about, with other people. And so I appreciate you guys, creating this platform and sticking with it. I see how much work goes on behind the scenes. Thank you guys.
Thanks for that.
For sure. As our first live guest on season 3 of the SemiAmericans podcast, with the mixing pot that we call America, many of us have had similar questions in our lives or our friends and our families' lives. And through our conversations today, we hope to shed light and normalize the ever-changing cultural, religious, and racial dynamics of families and relationships in America. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well put, Daniel. For the SemiAmericans podcast, season 3, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the support. This is your co-host, Emmanuel B., signing off for Daniel U. and JP. Thank you so much. And we're signing off. Peace.